Today, we're diving into a conflict that many people feared for decades, but maybe never truly believed would happen. A direct, hot war between the United States and Iran.
And right now, as I'm recording this, we are on day 46 of that very war. It's a conflict that is already reshaping the Middle East and sending shockwaves around the entire globe. And while it might feel like it came out of nowhere, its roots go back nearly half a century.
So how in the world did we get here? That's the big question we're going to answer. To really understand how decades of hostility finally exploded into open warfare, you have to trace the long, complicated path that led us to this exact moment.
So let's set the scene. The conflict we're in officially kicked off on February 28, 2026, lighting a fire that, frankly, had been decades in the making. To understand the fire that's raging today, we have to look at the fuse. And it is a very, very long fuse, one that was first lit all the way back in 1979. It all starts in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution, an event that completely shattered the US-Iran alliance. Fast forward a couple of decades, and the world discovers Iran has a secret nuclear program, which, you can imagine, set off all kinds of international alarms. There was a brief glimmer of hope in 2015 with the big nuclear deal, the JCPOA, but that fell apart just 3 years later when the US pulled out, slamming the door on what seemed like the last best chance for a peaceful solution. Now, a huge piece of Iran's strategy over the years has been to build its influence and fight its enemies, namely the US and Israel, without having to get into a direct fight itself. And it did this by building something called the Axis of Resistance, basically a way to fight a shadow war, all across the Middle East. And this map right here shows you just how wide that network really is. You're talking about powerful armed groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, all the way to the Houthis in Yemen, and a whole web of militias in Iraq and Syria. All of them get money, weapons, and training from Tehran. So for years, that long fuse was burning, but it was burning slowly. But starting in late 2023, things started to accelerate, dramatically. The whole region was pushed towards a tipping point that, in retrospect, looks almost unavoidable. The spark was the Hamas attack on October 7th. That singular event triggered a massive Israeli military response that didn't just stay in Gaza. It kicked off a systematic campaign to hit and degrade Iran's entire network of proxies across the region. By early 2026, the regime in Iran was feeling squeezed from all sides. On the outside, its proxy network was taking a serious beating. But on the inside, things were just as bad. The economy was collapsing, and the government was facing the largest mass protests it had seen in decades, which it met with incredible force. The regime was arguably at its weakest point in years, and that vulnerability set the stage for a huge, dangerous gamble. And then came the final move, this time from Washington. The U.S. said it had intelligence that Iran, as a desperate show of strength, was restarting its nuclear weapons program. The response? The largest American military buildup in the region since the 2003 Iraq War. The chessboard was set. With tensions at an absolute fever pitch, the shadow war that had defined the region for decades was about to turn into a hot war, a direct conflict between nations. On February 28th, it happened. The U.S. and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, and the strikes were huge. They hit military headquarters, government buildings, and, crucially, key nuclear sites. In a development that shocked everyone, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei was killed in the attack. But here's the really controversial part. This all happened while diplomatic negotiations were actually taking place. Some analysts think it was a calculated risk, a move to cripple the regime before it could agree to a deal that some in the West saw as too weak. Iran's response wasn't just swift, it was massive. This wasn't some symbolic single missile strike. This was an overwhelming barrage aimed at targets all across the region. I mean, just look at the scale of this. Hundreds of drones and missiles slammed into U.S. bases in pretty much every major Gulf country: Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, and the attacks even reached as far as a British base in Cyprus. The shadow war was officially over. A full-blown regional war had begun. And the human cost has been just immense. In only 46 days, more than 1 million people have been driven from their homes. It's a number that really speaks to how widespread and devastating this conflict has been. The economic fallout hit almost immediately. Iran did exactly what everyone had feared for years. It shut down the Strait of Hormuz. You know, that narrow waterway where nearly a fifth of the entire world's oil supply passes through.
That one move sent fuel prices soaring, created shortages across Asia, and got everyone worried that the Houthis might try to do the same thing in another critical shipping lane. Okay, so after more than a month of intense fighting, the direct attacks have paused, which brings us to the very fragile, very tense situation we find ourselves in today.
Right now, a fragile 2-week ceasefire is holding. In return, Iran has partially reopened the Strait of Hormuz. But we have to be really clear here. This is a pause, not a peace treaty. The fundamental problems that started this war are all still very much on the table. And this quote from U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance really sums up the American position perfectly. The number one demand, the thing this all hinges on, is a rock-solid, verifiable commitment from Iran that it will permanently give up its quest for nuclear weapons.
But what makes this all so complicated is that the ceasefire doesn't cover everything. Israel's war against Hezbollah is still raging in Lebanon, and Hezbollah is refusing to even consider a diplomatic solution. It's why so many experts are warning us not to be fooled by the quiet, that this calm is just masking much deeper dangers simmering right below the surface.
And that's where we stand today, on day 46. The direct fire between the U.S. and Iran has stopped, for now. But the core conflict over Iran's nuclear program is still there, unresolved. And it leaves us with one final, very unsettling question. Is this just a pause, with the real war yet to come?